It was just past midnight when the first dance broke out beneath the rain-slicked glow of a Brooklyn street lamp. A crowd had gathered outside the Paramount Theatre, where the air was thick with sweat, incense, and the sound of cheap speakers carrying the voice of a man who once drove Uber shifts through Astoria traffic while dreaming of something larger than himself. Now, Zohran Mamdani, son of an Indian poet and a Ugandan filmmaker, a democratic socialist in the glass and steel capital of global finance, had just been declared the next mayor of New York City. Inside, confetti clung to camera lenses. Outside, people swayed and shouted and wept. This was not just victory, it was rupture. They danced because something had cracked, not fully open, not yet, but enough for light to slip in. Across the country, similar tremors rippled through the electorate. In Virginia, Abigail Spanberger stood on stage and teased her teenage daughter for not cleaning her room, a small, unscripted moment with the weight of history behind it. Spanberger, a former intelligence officer with the Central Intelligence Agency, had just been elected as Virginia's first woman governor. In New Jersey, Mickey Sherrill, a former Navy helicopter pilot and prosecutor, became the first woman from the Democratic Party to hold the office of governor. And in California, voters handed Governor Gavin Newsom a scalpel and told him to cut. Proposition 50 passed with a narrow but decisive margin, overturning the state's independent congressional map and redrawing 5 House districts to favor Democrats. It was, Newsom argued, the only way to counter the Republican Party's aggressive redistricting efforts, especially those pushed through in Texas. "Fight fire with fire," he said, and the people, or at least enough of them, agreed. These victories were not isolated. They were the first definitive electoral rebuke of Donald Trump's second presidency. The former president, now once again the sitting president, had spent the evening not campaigning, but casting blame. On social media, he attributed the Republican losses to the government shutdown, now the longest in American history, and to his name not appearing on the ballot. But behind the scenes, the losses told a different story. From the suburbs of Loudoun County in Virginia, to the corners of Newark, to the crowded neighborhoods of Queens, a new political weather had begun to form. The storm had been coming for some time. Now it had a name. To understand this moment, you must rewind, not to the ballot boxes or the primaries, but to the slow erosion of trust that began long before the 2024 election. That year, the Democratic Party collapsed inward. President Biden stepped aside. Kamala Harris faltered. The party fractured, and Trump retook the presidency. Not in a landslide, but through exhaustion. Voters who had once dreamed of transformation now simply stayed home. But the elections of November in the year 2025 did not emerge from the ashes of that failure. They were born in kitchens, in grocery stores, on subway platforms. They were born in the rent hikes and the childcare wait lists, in the price of eggs and the weight of unpaid medical bills. That is what Zohran Mamdani understood. His proposals, universal childcare from 6 weeks old, 5 city-run grocery stores offering subsidized food, rent freezes for 1 million tenants, were not the abstractions of ideological zealotry. They were lifelines. He called them practical. His opponents called them dangerous. Curtis Sliwa compared them to Soviet rationing. Mamdani called it a public option for produce. The message, filtered through grassroots canvassing and TikTok testimonials, resonated. Not because voters embraced socialism, but because they recognized survival. Even Charlemagne the God, speaking to CNN on election night, distilled it best. It wasn't socialism, it was affordability. That word, affordability, became a kind of code for housing, for groceries, for a sense of dignity. It also became the clearest dividing line between parties. The Democratic Party, at least for this brief moment, spoke to those concerns. The Republican Party, tied too tightly to Trump's increasingly erratic orbit, did not. In New Jersey, Jack Ciattarelli had tried to carve out space for himself, running as a Jersey guy, moderate in tone, practical in vision. But Trump's endorsement followed him like smoke. Democratic ads made sure of it. The voters noticed, and Ciattarelli lost. In California, the win was more ambiguous. By dismantling the Independent Redistricting Commission, Democrats risked eroding one of the party's few claims to procedural virtue. The new congressional map may deliver 5 more seats in the midterms. But at what cost? What moral ground is surrendered when one begins to mirror the tactics of the opposition? Still, the mood on the left was unmistakably jubilant. In Texas, the special election for the 18th congressional district narrowed the Republican House majority even further, as 2 Democratic candidates advanced to a runoff. In Virginia, Ghazala Hashmi became the first Muslim woman ever elected to statewide office. Her win, like Mamdani's, was about more than demographics. It was about belonging. And yet the absence of the Republican Party's voice in this narrative is as revealing as any headline. In the CNN coverage that night, there were no interviews with Republican strategists, no policy rebuttals, no clear alternative vision, just silence, a vacuum of imagination. Or perhaps a moment of reckoning. This is not the first time the pendulum has swung. In the midterms of 2006, in the blue wave of 2018, Americans have a pattern of correcting course. But every swing births its shadow. The victories of tonight will almost certainly provoke a backlash. The machinery of political resistance is already whirring into motion. Which is why what happens next matters more than the headlines. Will these new leaders deliver? Will Mamdani's grocery stores exist in 3 years, or remain slogans? Will Spanberger's governance match the historic nature of her win? Will Newsom, now eyed as a possible presidential candidate for 2028, turn this redistricting into durable power or temporary relief? Back in Brooklyn, long after the reporters had left, a woman held up her phone and played an old voice message from her mother. "We don't get to give up," the voice said. "Not ever." Her mother had cleaned offices in Manhattan for 35 years. She never missed an election. She died last spring. Outside the theatre, someone began singing an old protest song in a voice like cracked glass. A few others joined. It was 2 a.m, cold, quiet. The kind of quiet that comes only after noise. And for the first time in a long time, the people believed not in perfection, but in possibility. Like, share and subscribe.